being a catalyst means you're an advocate. It means you're getting in there and you're actually, you have a point of view and you're helping to drive people in the right direction.
I'm Shannon Lucas.
And I'm Tracy Lovejoy, and we're the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change.
This is our podcast,
Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out,
where we highlight catalysts that are creating amazing change in the world. And I'm so excited today to have time catching up with Chris Librie. Chris is Applied Materials Director of ESG, Corporate Sustainability and Reporting. In that role, Chris is responsible for accelerating the company's environmental, social, and governance programs while communicating these to external stakeholders, which we'll hear more about. Prior to Applied, Chris most recently served as the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at Samsung Semiconductor, where he led the company's social investments and its regional response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Before that, he led ESG and corporate responsibility programs at eBay and HP, helping both organizations improve their ESG performance and reporting while achieving the highest recognition from leading external organizations, including the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, and the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, DJSI. Thanks for being here today, Chris.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Shannon. And that I don't usually get to listen to that whole introduction, and it's quite long.
It's quite impressive, though. It's very impressive what you've been doing. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave any of it out, actually. So I'm glad to have you here today. We'd love to start off to hearing about how you relate to the concept of catalyst.
I feel like I've been a catalyst all my life in the sense that, I do see kind of infinite possibilities, and I'm kind of thinking a lot further down the road, I think, than most people. And, sometimes it's a gift. Many times it's a gift to have that kind of line of sight and vision. But a lot of times it's also, a hindrance when other people aren't in the same place. So it's especially in ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, as you called it, or CSR, or sustainability. The space is changing all the time. The bar is being raised all the time, and so it's really, my desire is always to kind of make advances, and certainly in corporate America, some of those advances are more challenging than others, and you have to bring other people along with you. So yeah, definitely the concept of catalyst not only applies to me personally, but also to the roles that I've been in these past 10 or 12 years.
I mean, sadly, that's true, right? I wish it was sort of more just standard operating procedure built into the organizations, but I think it's a great pivot to talking about what you're catalyzing right now. What are you up to in that role?
Well, Applied Materials has made tremendous progress in the past couple of years. I joined the company 2 years ago as part of the plan to really kind of unlock the ESG and sustainability program. And we have the support of our CEO, Gary Dickerson, and his executive team, and we've made tremendous progress. So I'm not going to get into the kind of ins and outs of that, but we can if you want. But the main point is, like, how do we maintain that progress? How do we continue to drive our not only our performance in this area, but also be a leader in our industry and show up as a catalyst for change within the industry around ESG. So our biggest question right now, because we have a lot of great goals out to 2030, we're going to reduce our carbon footprint by 50%. We're going to hit 100% renewable energy by 2030. There's all sorts of terrific things going on. One of the issues that many companies are grappling with right now is called net zero, which is basically to bring your carbon emissions as a company to zero effectively. And a lot of companies are signing up and making that commitment, which is great. Some of them have plans in place to get there, which is great. But not all of them. And so, and we're, very much an engineering-based company. So we're looking at this space, or looking at what other people are doing. And we're also trying to consider, how do we do this? And how do we do it right? How do we do it in a way that, is consonant with our values. And we honestly, we still haven't really decided whether or not to do that. It's still something that we're evaluating. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we're working with right now.
Can you define for our audience, can you define net zero and maybe talk about
Sure.
what scope you're focusing on?
Well, I mean, so let's see, without getting into too much ESG jargon, there's three different aspects of a company's emissions. Scope 1 is the direct emissions that a company creates through its operations. They can be literally emissions into the air. We don't do that, but some companies do. For instance, company vehicles would be a Scope 1 emission if they're obviously fossil fuel oriented. Scope 2 are the emissions associated with the power that your company buys. So the electricity used to power your facilities, essentially. And then Scope 3 is this giant thing, which is everything in your value chain. It's your suppliers and the product getting to you, and then it's the product leaving you and going to your customers, and it's the use of your product by your customers. So it's an enormous category. Most manufacturing companies, their Scope 3 is many, many times the size of their Scopes 1 and 2. So that's
Thank
what
you for explaining that for the audience. Yeah.
Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if you want to get to net zero, what you need to do to reduce the emissions of all three of those scopes in line with the 1.5 degree pathway that the Paris Accord has set in place. So you're reducing emissions, and the assumption is you're never going to be able to eliminate all your emissions. So to get to net zero, you're going to actually remove from the atmosphere that remaining carbon. That's the challenge. So number one, reduce. Number two, remove. And that's what gets you to net zero. And essentially, all companies that are looking at this at the moment are trying to figure out, well, how do we do that? It's a really enormous challenge.
So I want to say thank you for the explanation for the listeners. And it's fantastic that you have leadership support. Like it sounds at the top level from a broad perspective. What are some of the challenges trying to even make the decision? Like, I'm imagining that you did a great 30-minute intro to that, but like, how do you even clarify the vision and then have the conversations and make the decisions about a hugely impactful decision like that as a Catalyst leader?
Well, think about, if you're a business in a growing industry, the challenge is actually getting larger all the time, right? So at the moment, given meetings like this, you and I are connecting on Zoom. We're all doing this on a constant basis. We're all using, cell phones all the time. There's all sorts of devices on the edge. So the need for technology is growing. The need for chips is growing. So, I mean, I'm assuming that everybody knows who Applied Materials are. We make the machines that make the chips that go in the devices that we all use. We also make the high quality displays that are in phones and TVs and things like that. So essentially, that demand for those products is driving our industry, which is awesome. I mean, it's wonderful to be working in a growing industry, but if you're the director of ESG, that makes your challenge that much bigger. So that's one issue that we need to figure out. Okay, we're growing as a business. Obviously, it increases our capacity to do things, but it also increases the size of the challenge. Second issue is, you really need to know, what the largest buckets of impact are in your Scope 3. Is it your suppliers? In many cases, it is for a lot of companies. Is it the use of your products? In some cases, that's the issue that needs to be dealt with. And then you have to build teams internally to help drive improvements, reductions in each of those areas. So it's definitely a team sport. And that's, something I always say about ESG or sustainability in general is it takes a village in order to get it done.
So, I mean, I'm guessing that you don't have a direct team of hundreds of people across an organization the size of your company. So how do you tap into the people that you would need to, again, have them understand and kind of give you both a mind share and their time and support?
Well, I think this is where being a catalyst is helpful, because being a catalyst means you're an advocate. It means you're getting in there and you're actually, you have a point of view and you're helping to drive people in the right direction. And so I think that's an asset. I think the other thing I think that works, at least for me, is, I've been doing this kind of work for about 12, 13 years. Before that, I was a marketing director. And so I worked with lots of different functions. It was kind of part of my role to work with different functions in the company, whether it was R&D or manufacturing or sales. And so being able to kind of put myself in their shoes a little bit, understand the world, also understand how the business runs. So I'm not kind of the ESG director who's never been responsible for a P&L, for instance. So it's kind of like having those kind of I don't know how to put it, kind of like those abilities to work in and out of ESG in a way. I'm an ESG director, but I also understand how a business operates, and I can kind of connect with people on that level, hopefully, and that helps to drive collective action.
Yeah, so interesting about the marketing background. When I was building out the innovation program at Vodafone, I realized that like 50% of my job as a change leader was essentially marketing. It's like the storytelling and the bringing people along, and 50% of that was internal. I'm wondering what key learnings you've had as you've been bringing people along and, understanding. It sounds like you're demonstrating an understanding of knowing the business and still sort of bringing them along.
Well, one thing I think, as I mentioned earlier, and obviously this is all, kicked off by our CEO, Gary Dickerson, and he's been a tireless advocate and supporter of ESG within our company. And you need that, you really do. But you don't want to rely on that entirely. I mean, because you can't just kind of go around and tell people, hey, we need to do this because Gary says so. I mean, that just doesn't get you all that far. So, I think what you need to do is you need to kind of inspire people with the fact that this is the right thing to do. And, this is going to also help them in their different roles. And so, whether it's, working with, say, facilities and showing them ways in which ESG and sustainability will help reduce their cost, or working with one of our biggest parts of our business is actually a services group that services the tools that we have at our customers, right? At Intel and others, chip manufacturers of that nature. And so, that's our largest workforce, really. And, getting them engaged, getting them to see themselves in some of our social objectives, right? Because ESG is also social, it's not just environmental. So, our diversity and inclusion objectives and our other, kind of more human rights related, workforce related objectives as a company. Those are all things that, people will see not only as things that they need to do, but also that they have an advantage for them, because a more diverse workforce is a stronger one, a more engaged workforce and all that. So it's kind of, it's really, I see it as, it's kind of like you say, I think ESG and marketing are also quite similar. It's also a bit similar to kind of being a general manager, because you're constantly moving within these different functions. Finance, for instance, now we have the SEC getting engaged on climate disclosures, and they want us to put that forward. So it's driving a much stronger relationship for my team with the finance organization. But you're absolutely right. The ESG teams in most companies are pretty small, and that's a natural, because we're a cost center. We're a central organization. We don't generate a lot of revenue, or any revenue, for instance. And so it's kind of like, you have to operate through the organization. You have to work through influence, and really, drive a kind of cohesive team. And I think that's the fun part of it, is kind of constantly working across the group and bringing people together. We have an ESG leadership council, which has many of these business leaders and functional leaders on it. And, we meet on a regular basis to talk about, our objectives and how we're progressing.
Spot on. So like the key takeaway for me is it's all about influence, right? I mean, it's influence. And what I heard you say even behind the influence is like, what is the win for them in it? Sort of the with
Exactly.
like, what is it? What's in it for me kind of thing. I guess just a final question before we go to the next round. It's a lot of emotional labor is what I hear. It's like you're doing a lot of the emotional, like bringing people along. How do you sustain yourself and your energy, especially because my guess is that they're not moving as fast as you urgently think they probably should.
Some of them, yeah. I mean, there's always stronger connections and stronger advocates within the organization, and you soon realize that, these folks are people I don't have to worry about. These folks I might need to kind of work a little bit more closely with. But yeah, in terms of sustaining myself, I mean, one of the reasons why I love this work, as opposed to, I mean, I loved being a marketing director, but frankly, it got to the point where, I don't know how much soap I could sell. I mean, I was working for Unilever. And so, it's great. I mean, they had great products, but honestly, selling more Dove is kind of gets a little bit, kind of, I don't know, whatever, self-fulfilling after a while. So, ESG is an objective that's a much higher one. At least it feels like, we're doing something that's not only right for the company, but also right for the planet and for people. So there's that. And then on a personal level, my thing is I love running. So I run about 20 miles a week, and that's just kind of being outside. I don't like to run on treadmills. I like to get outside in the fresh air. I'm lucky enough to live in the Bay Area, and the weather is pretty conducive to it. And so, that's my outlet and my ability to kind of, get recharged.
Love it. Love it. And we know data shows that leaders who can do that and have some commitment to their rejuvenation practices actually create more effective change in the orgs. All right. You ready for rapid fire?
Sure.
All right. First one, what piece of advice do you have for up and coming catalysts? Or said another way, what do you wish you had known about being a catalyst when you were 20?
I think it's listen better. Yeah, that would be my advice. Is my inclination is to analyze and act, and I think there's a step in between, which is listen. And I think the listening piece enables you to understand who's the catalyst in the room with you, and who are perhaps the folks who might be a bit of an anchor or what have you, holding you back. And and then you can work to bring them along. So I think that's key.
Yes, it is. Like, if you could do one thing, people listen. Yes, listen better. What advice do you have for executives about identifying and tapping into their catalysts?
Well, I think it's important for executives to recognize the catalysts in their team. Number one. Number two, to not be threatened by them. I mean, I think, I've had a lot of great bosses in my career, and most of them, all of them, in fact, have recognized that, they're only as successful as the people who report to them. And so, I think giving the catalysts in your team the space to innovate and to get things done, but also, supporting them, advising them, is really important. Every now and then it doesn't hurt to have a boss who says, hey, just take a pause, relax, we can live to fight another day, what have you. I had a boss, speaking of Unilever, years ago, who said, when I was a little too worked up about something, Chris, it's just soap. So that was always like the calming thing I needed to hear. It's like, okay.
Awesome. Good perspective. What's the worst thing about being a catalyst?
The worst thing, I think, is getting frustrated. I think it's like, and another piece of counsel I would give is be patient. Be patient, because it's easy to be frustrated and say, bah, I'm out of here, or whatever, or bah, and do something silly that's not constructive. And I think if you're patient, things will kind of right themselves eventually. I mean, not every time, but I think it's important to kind of try and be aware of your catalyst tendencies and try to manage them, and in the hope of, you're going to live to fight another day and hopefully win. So
Yes, that advice is so spot on, and it can be so hard. It's like, oh,
It
yes.
is.
Okay. What's the best part about being a catalyst?
Well, the best part is when when you see where things are going, should go, and they start going there, and you see the
Mm,
plan coming together. I mean, it's an amazing feeling. One thing I would say about my experience at HP was, we coined the term, my team coined the term living progress for what the team was doing in ESG and sustainability, because the point was we were never going to get there. It's a
yes.
constant journey. But when you see that that plan is going in the direction that it ought to, that it needs to achieve your goals, that's a wonderful feeling. And helping to pilot the organization in that direction is really, really awesome.
I just feel as I hear you, like my body was just like, oh yes, like they're just enjoying the journey and knowing there is no endpoint as a catalyst. We're always going to be progressing, but like there's a permission to just like let go a little bit of we've got to do this thing
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's what's great about ESG is that there really isn't, I mean, let's say we figure out this net zero thing. I mean, there's still going to be things we need to do because it's going to take us at least 15, 20 years to get to that point. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen between now and then.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Do you have a call to action for our listeners?
Well, I mean, I'll be shameless, and I'll plug the fact that every year Applied Materials issues its sustainability report, which is a recap of everything we did last year. So actually, the 2021 report, believe it or not, is coming out this Thursday. It'll be on our corporate website, and I would encourage people to take a look. There's a lot of great stuff we've done there, and a lot of new things that we have in store for our plans. Yeah, and then on a more personal level, you were asking me earlier, Shannon, about books, and
Yeah.
there's so many books. So when I run, I listen to books. I do audiobooks
Nice.
all the time. I had done podcasts for a long time, but I prefer to lose myself in a book. And one of my favorite writers is a guy named Amor Towles. He's an American writer. He used to be a fund manager, but in his spare time, he was also studying writing, and he'd gone to Stanford on a scholarship to learn creative writing. So in any event, he's got 3 awesome books. My favorite is A Gentleman in Moscow.
Oh
Uh,
yes. I didn't connect to the
yeah,
name. That book is amazing.
it's a wonderful
So
book.
good.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
one of the greatest characters ever, the
100%.
Count. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then his latest book is called The Lincoln Highway.
Oh, I'm gonna
And
totally get it because I loved
yeah,
that book. I mean, my whole family,
so
we just passed it around one summer whenever it came out. We all
well,
just binged it. Yeah.
yeah, so The Lincoln Highway is, I would say, almost as good as A Gentleman in Moscow.
It's a high bar. Yeah.
That's a high
Yeah.
bar, yeah, because
Yeah.
I think Gentleman in Moscow is my favorite ever. So anyway, there you
Thank you
go.
for sharing. I'm about to go on vacation, so I'm really excited for a vacation book instead of all the business books. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. We will put in the show notes a link to your report. We will put in the show notes the link to the author and the books. And I just wanted to say deep thanks. We'll continue. I'm excited to continue to watch the progress that you are driving these large companies to on behalf of the planet and its inhabitants. So thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. And of course, don't forget to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out. If you have other catalysts in your life, send a link their way to share the show. Thanks again.